Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. You ready for another episode of My Bigfoot Sighting? Alright then, let's do this.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, love's in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.
If you'd like to be able to listen to the show without ads and have full access to bonus content, that's an option. To find out how, please go to mybigfootsighting.com.
My Bigfoot sightings have involved multiple occasions at multiple times, and I really enjoy sharing them. My first close encounters involved basically, could it be? What was that? Like a lot of other people, strange things happen out in the woods, but probably the most profound that I knew involved something besides a animal or a person was having a cinder block sized object. I say rock, but I'm not sure. It could have been dirt clod. Back in about 2003, tweaked my mind a little bit. Several years pondered that, and then got connected with the BFRO, did a report, interacted with them, and it led to me having an actual first sighting in a waterway, lower floodplain involving the East Trinity River in North Texas. And since that time, I've kind of dedicated my personal life on the side, not my whole life, but, a substantial part of my recreational time, squatching, as people say. I had a close encounter with a family group up in Oklahoma in the Lake Eufaula area, east side going towards Porham, Oklahoma, one of the tributary creeks there. And it's in detail in my book, posted on Amazon. If somebody Googles Richard Taylor Bigfoot, it'll take you to the links of my book. And I share there some of my early experiences, and that meeting a family group in Oklahoma. Actually, 5 individuals approached me, and it was a game changer for me. Up until that time, I, as many other folks, assumed, and not drawn from personal experience or documentation, that this was just a very elusive, undiscovered primate. Although my Cherokee ancestry, which I studied after having some of my close encounters, view them very differently. Most of your native nations, it's not a debate with them. These things are a clan or tribal group of people. It's very common with a lot of your native nations. And to kind of give you a brief background, I'm a mixed blood Cherokee tribal member with the Cherokee Nation. My grandmother was full blood and registered. My grandfather was mixed blood and not registered. His family didn't really trust the government. Their ancestry was driven out of Cherokee's original land, and it's known as the Trail of Tears. And there are a lot of Cherokee people in that lineage that were never registered for that very reason. But thankful my grandmother was, and I'm very proud of the Cherokee bloodline that I have, but equally proud of the Scots, Irish, Dutch, and German. I can't be anybody but me, and I'm very proud of all the bloodlines. But after having my close encounter there, it was actually April 17th, 2011 in Oklahoma, my whole perception of these subjects changed. They weren't the mean, creepy, wild subjects that a lot of people view them as. And, perception can be almost reality for most people, or is reality. But I have been out there on close encounters, not feeling a bit threatened, not feeling a bit fearful or wanting to run. And yet the people around me, their perception was it was very scary. And I guess it's the fear of the unknown. And as I've got to know these subjects better, I'm not fearful of them. Now, would I say that I trust them unconditionally? No. But it's the same way with us in our society. You're safe around an overwhelming majority of group of people. And yet there are rogues in our society you don't want anything to do with. And it's very well the same with them. If it doesn't feel right, don't push the issue. But that was in April 17th, 2011. After having that close encounter, it seemed like the whole, I don't know, a paradigm shift or something. I had an understanding and respect for them. And I started noticing as I would go out, I wasn't having to do much effort. I wasn't thumping on trees and howling and, making any effort. But it seemed like when I got out there in some of these remote areas, they showed up to see what was going on. And I began to document them. In February 4th, 2012, I was in East Texas, Shelby County in particular. We were out there, I guess there was about 12 of us. I won't mention any names here or name drop. If I did, you'd probably recognize some of the names, and I have not asked them for permission to share their name. But one of them was a very wealthy benefactor that funded a lot of research regarding these subjects. And we were out there in the daytime, had my ears up, if you will, and I got the feeling we're being watched. And that's one thing that seems to have served me very well is most people have, or a lot of people have, this sixth sense about being watched or feeling like you're being watched. And I get that, but this is the same but different. When these subjects show up or they're close by, I can't put it into words, but I can feel them. I can sense them. And a lot of times I get the direction where they may be and where to look. And it served me very well. Well, on this day, February 4th, 2012, I got that feeling. It was before dark. We were gathering wood that we were going to have for a big campfire where you'd sit around and hang out. And I got the feeling of being watched. It became more profound. So I eased away from the dozen people and I went back towards where my vehicle was parked. And I just said this out loud, not loud enough for anybody else to hear, but I said, okay, big boy, I can feel you watching us. Where are you? Just kind of to myself. And I know this sounds far-fetched and some people may roll their eyes, but I'm telling you the truth of what happened. As I said that, I heard a call come from up the ridge, and I had kind of thought it might be that direction, but 360 degrees of wooded area, there's a lot of places to look. So I glanced up the ridge and I thought I saw something maybe 500-600 yards away up the ridge towards the top. I got my binoculars out and started scanning there, and I saw a dark patch that didn't match the greens and the browns. It was more darker than that. Maybe like what a buzzard would look like sitting up in a tree. And that's what one of the other guys later thought it was just a big buzzard. I told him, about a 600-pound buzzard. But anyway, I got better lenses out in my video and I started videoing it. And lo and behold, it's this subject sitting, well, at the time, I didn't know they were up in the tree. I just knew they were in the trees. I thought maybe on the side of the hill, peeking through the trees. Later, I determined they were 60 feet up in the trees after we went up there and identified the location a week later. But at that time, I'm looking, and I've got a video of it there. And one of the guys come over and they asked me, "What are you doing?" And you got to understand, my jury rig video had a 1x1 LED screen, and my jury rig, not my jury rig video, but I had a jury rig telephoto lens on the front. So all I had was that little LED screen to look at without my reading glasses on. I could see it, but not real clear. I knew what I was videoing was there. Later, looking at it, man, my jaw dropped. But I got this big guy up in the tree watching us. And it's pretty good video. I sent Vic a picture clip of the big guy up in the tree. Now, granted, GPS waypoints, it was 508 yards. And I didn't have, high dollar equipment, but I'm very satisfied with what I got. But I watched him there for several minutes. Good, clear look, something there. And I returned the next week. I got response calls to that. I've got videos of that too, where they call out. But in that first video, there's also a call there that you can hear. It's stuff like that that has happened to me over the years that is pretty satisfying. I've had them, like I said, in Lake Eufaula, 2 of them within 10 to 15 feet of me. They look like something out of a Steven Spielberg movie. But it doesn't go just with squatching. I've been out actually working. My first career was public safety, law enforcement, expertise in fire and explosions. And in June 6th, 2012, I was back in Oklahoma. I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I was up in Oklahoma working for a company, which I won't name, but a major underwriter in the insurance industry. It was June 6th, 2012. It was a hot summer day in Oklahoma, humid and hot. And I had gone out there to look at a damaged piece of equipment on a new well pad going in. And I got out there, Bigfoot, none of that was on my mind except the fact that this area was down a private road for miles, a gated private road that you just didn't get in there and wander in unless you had a right to be in there. And it was a new oil well pad being worked out with heavy earth movers, bulldozers and stuff. They were building the well pad, and one of their pieces of equipment had caught on fire and burned. And I went out there and I did all my field examination, made my notes. But by any means, once I got finished with my photography and my physical view, I was back in my truck with the air conditioning on because it was a hot June summer day. And I'm just doing my work when all of a sudden I get that feeling of being watched, and I'm going, you got to be kidding me, man. I'm not out here for squatching, but man, this feeling was really strong. So in my truck, I started just casually scanning the tree line, looking at the first levels of cover, and then started concentrating on the gaps between that first level, like 2 trees, maybe a 10 or 20 foot gap. And then you could see another line of vegetation, maybe 30, 40 yards behind. And these subjects really like to use second and third levels of cover. They rarely get up to that immediate line of foliage, but it's usually secondary or third levels. That's one of the things I've learned on where to look for these subjects. And lo and behold, when I got to my far right in the curve of the windshield, I saw something dip down behind a bush. I'd say back there about 50 yards, 50, 60 yards. And I tried to look to see if it would pop its head back up or whatever it was that moved, and it didn't. So in the truck, I turned my head back to my left, but I was leaving my eyes looking right at that location. And as I turned my head back to the left, this subject's head pops up behind a bush, and then they move over to another tree limb or something. They changed their cover a little bit, thinking that I had turned my head. They were that aware of where I was looking, and they changed that, when I turned my head back, but I'm looking to my far right. Maybe the glare of the windshield, occluded them. They didn't know where my eyes were actually looking, but they knew where my head was looking. So I just stopped my head right there, and I reached down without looking and got my camera and kind of fumbled and acted like I was taking a picture straight ahead, but I flipped out the little LED screen and I turned the camera sideways and clicked two pictures, or one picture actually, before they ducked off. But these subjects are not going to just kind of come out and wave and say hello. In most cases, I mean, I've heard of the people being charged and, hunters coming face to face with them. But for the most part, I have learned they're very subtle. They use cover and concealment to perfection. And in most cases, you're going to have people saying, "Did you hear that? What was that?" And I look back before I had my profound experiences with these subjects. It's going back probably, I was in my 40s. Well, that's why I'm going to share my age with you. Don't want to do that. We'll just say a couple decades ago. I was out on the West Coast with some in-laws in the Carson Iceberg Wilderness area, probably 50 miles south of where the Donner Party got snowed in back in the 1800s. And a lot of people are aware of the Donner Party. Just where we were was not someplace you just drove up, parked, and got your camping gear out. It was a big hike up through a pass at about 10 or 11,000 feet down into a meadow. And it wasn't a place people just come strolling by and casually hanging out. It took effort to get in there. And I remember my in-laws were big deer hunters, and they had hunted that area of just off the John Muir Trail, or Sierra Crest Trail. Anyway, very rugged. And I remember one night sitting around the campfire and hearing this god-awful moan. And I'm trying to figure it out, and the other 3 or 4 people there weren't paying much attention to it. And I asked them, I stopped them, and it was already dark, and we're around the campfire. I said, "Man, what is that?" And they didn't pay it much mind. One of them kind of looked out there and said, "Oh, probably a lost cow." And they brushed it off. It didn't tweak their interest much. It tweaked mine big time at the time, and I wasn't associating with Bigfoot. That same trip, I came across a deer. My father-in-law had told me I was carrying a .357 Magnum with special hunting ammunition, not to hunt, but for protection, the bear, mountain lion up there. And he basically shared with me, he said, "Look, Rick," he said, "none of us are going to tag out on our licenses. If you get a good shot on a deer," he said, "take it." He said, "One of us will come up and tag it. It's meat." So I was kind of quasi-hunting. I didn't pay the $500 for the out-of-state tag, but I wouldn't have shot anything unless I was sure I could have cleanly taken something down. I was up a ridge hunting, quasi-hunting, and I noticed a full-grown mule deer doe lying dead on this little incline. And I eased over there looking around, making sure, I wasn't interrupting somebody's hunting endeavors, although I don't know if there were any other hunters up there. We never heard anything, and they kind of assigned areas where people could hunt. So I don't think anybody else was up there, but I wasn't in camp either. I was up a ridge a ways. And this deer was dead, and I got up to it, and I noticed a big hole in the upper sternum area of this deer's chest. And I'm thinking, oh man, that's an exit wound, you know. So I go to looking, and then I notice both of her back legs are broke, cleanly broke in a 90-degree angle, right on the femur. They were broke in a 90-degree angle, which I thought was both legs, not just one, but I'm looking around. There's no rocks. There's no crevice or ravine. It's basically just a sloping angle on this area with grass. And I don't see any way this deer could have fallen and broke. So I couldn't find any other bullet wound, but I noticed some of the entrails looked like they'd been pulled out of this fairly large hole in her sternum. Something pulled them out. And at the time, I didn't associate it with anything but just kind of a head scratcher. Much later, I learned that they do eat deer, and they will break the legs to keep the deer from running off, and they can come back later. But anyway, at the time, as many people do, I went up in this rock formation area, and for the better part of an hour, I was looking at probably yearling deer, a few good-sized doe, maybe a dozen altogether coming through on this game trail. And it was a perfect ambush point, which I was sitting in. Didn't have, any doe tags, but if a good buck would have come through, I probably could have got him, or taken him down. But at some point, I got the distinct feeling of being watched. And so much so that the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I felt like a predator was fixing to pounce on me. I jumped up, I rolled around on a broad rock, I pulled the pistol and cocked it back single action, fully expecting to be attacked by something. Nothing appeared, nothing happened, and I kind of backward walked back down out of that area of rocks, kind of in a ravine. When I got on open land or sloping down that hill, I began to walk backwards fast at first, and then I turned around my legs. I still looked back over my shoulder, and I took off at a pretty good jog with that pistol for several hundred yards, expecting something to appear and try to chase me down. Didn't happen, but eventually reholstered and made my way back down into camp. Didn't tell my in-laws or the other friends there about the feeling. I just told them I was up there looking. I think this happens to a lot of people in that probably is never told. They hear, they feel things, they can't associate it with it. Well, after my close encounters, after meeting or, having the close encounter with the family group, I have gotten a lot of great stories from other people. I think the most profound for me is the Cherokee people, before the Europeans drove them out, they lived in most of Kentucky and Tennessee, the northern half of Georgia and Alabama, and stretches around into North and South Carolina and West Virginia. That was their original dwelling places before the European settlers arrived, and they were eventually driven out. Cherokee are known one of the 5 civilized tribes because they embraced Christianity, land ownership, and of course it didn't do them any good when gold was discovered in Georgia. And not going to dwell there, but it's known as the Trail of Tears, where they were removed. But for thousands of years, they lived there. And Larry Shade, Cherokee storyteller, talks about the elders passing down stories and history of the Uni Udawahi, okay? Basically forest beings of the lost or secluded tribe. And this story relates these big guys as a clan of people. And Larry Shade goes on to explain that the Cherokee people would leave edible roots and berries around the perimeter of their village for the Uni Udawahi. And in turn, the big guys would watch over the Cherokee people during their hunting and gathering endeavors. A symbiotic relationship. It wasn't by any means predatory or a lot of conflict. And with that in mind, I've made probably a half dozen expeditions into the Kentucky area with the BFRO, Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization. And I've made 2 or 3 expeditions with the KBRO. Charlie Raymond runs that organization. Great man, great venues, but he'll host expeditions out there in the fall and spring, usually avoiding the hot summers. But I was there here last year with a group. We had walked down a very secluded one way in, one way out roadway along a particular river in this central Kentucky area. I'm going to say it took us maybe a mile and a half to reach the dead end of this access road. And there, like I said, there was no other way out. And we sat around there around the campfire. One of the guys there had a guitar, did some excellent singing and playing for one person, very accomplished and talented musician. Big guys like that kind of stuff, okay? People out there laughing, music. They're curious. That's one of their Achilles heels, is they're curious. And if you're just chilling out, hanging out there, they're going to come watch. I've learned that over time. So sure enough, I'm there and I'm enjoying the gathering. We're talking and just laughing and joking and listening to the songs. Well, at some point, I get the feeling, okay, there's somebody here. And I kind of discreetly ease away from the group. And I walk across this access road to an open area. And then maybe 100 yards down was a river with trees and vegetation. So I'm kind of scanning out there, and in a short time, I see movement. And when I say movement, it's partially blocked by the trees and the limbs and leaves and foliage, but I could tell there's a figure back in there by my thermal, signature bleeding through the gaps and stuff. There's something kind of tall and upright moving around over there. So I watch it for a while, and finally it settles by a pretty good tree, and I actually see a head and shoulders peer out from around the tree. And like I said, it was a better part of 100 yards, and it's watching us. It's very aware of where we are. Could it have been an NBA tall basketball player out there hanging out in the middle of nowhere without a stitch of clothes on? It could be, it wasn't quadrupedal and down. It was up on 2 legs. I could see that. Chances are, no. There's a person out there hanging out in the pitch dark in the middle of nowhere. But this area had reported Bigfoot sightings, one of which is why Charlie took us to that area. More likely a big guy. So I'm watching him, or they, that could have been a female. Better part of 10 feet tall. I later in the daytime found the trees and got an approximate height anywhere between 8 to 10 feet tall. But anyway, it's watching us. And one of the people, it was a new attendee, had never had any Bigfoot experiences, walks over there kind of using a red game cap light because it was near pitch dark. And he comes over and he said, "Hey, what are you doing, Rick?" I said, "Oh, I'm watching a big guy down by the river." He goes, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "He's out there watching this." He said, "No, man, no way." He said, "Man, I'd love to see that." I said, "Well, hey, here." And I hand him my scope, and, I'm standing there and he knows which direction I'm standing and looking. And I said, "Okay, at the 10 o'clock position from where I'm standing," I said, "You see the field?" "Oh, yeah, yeah." I said, "See that line of trees?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Look right there at the 10 o'clock position." There's a little pause. And then he goes, Yeah, I can see him. I said, yeah, you can? He said, yeah, his head and shoulders. He's peeking out from around a tree. I said, yeah, you got it. That's him. It made my day or that night to share that stuff. And I've done that before with people, let them have a look at these subjects for the first time. So he's watching them. And one of my, I won't say passions, but my interest is if these subjects, which is well recorded with the Cherokee Nation, and Kentucky was one of their original lands, and if this went on for thousands of years, these agreements, and there's other history of other native nations actually trading with the big guys, okay? I think the Salish have a history there. I can't offhand recall, but there's several nations, and there are some nations that had severe conflicts with them, which doesn't surprise me either, because the Cherokee's arch enemy was the Iroquois, or the Mohawk, as some people know them more. Man, they had a lot of bloody conflict with them. So even the native nations had fights. It only stands to reason that if these things are tribal and clannish, that there would be conflict. But in the Cherokee history recorded, there wasn't this conflict at all. So if they had a relationship with them spanning generations upon generations, they might understand Cherokee is my interest. So while this gentleman was watching the one subject looking at us, and I'm by no means fluent. My grandmother was fluent. My aunts and uncles were fluent. I know a few greetings, a few phrases, and can converse a little bit. And I'm sure my Cherokee has a English accent to it, but I try, what I can. So while he's watching that subject in the tree line, I said, watch him. Tell me if he does anything. And he says, okay. And I said, Gata uste, dejato, asking, what is your name? And I said, did he do anything? And, guy goes, no, he's just watching, or they, I can't remember if he said he or they, but, I said, keep watching. And more expressively, I said, Gata uste, dejato. What is your name? And, the second time, a deep bullfrog voice. Now, we had heard movement off to our right. I forgot to add that. One closer, maybe on a little side creek. And I'd asked him, do you hear that? I forgot to put that part of the story in. But the second time I said, what is your name? On this right side, not the big guy down there watching us that we could see, but it was this movement on this little side creek, perpendicular. It came up out of the main river to our right, maybe 100, 150 feet. And there was vegetation there too. But from that area, on my second asking in the Cherokee tongue, what is your name? I hear this claw. Deep. That's no in Cherokee. Claw. I get this no reply. And, man, I busted out laughing. I said, man, did you hear that? Again, a lot of people think these subjects are dumb animals. And look, everybody's got a right to their opinion. I'm not being critical or anything. I just know I like to share what I've experienced, and people can believe what they want to believe. But I was in area of southeast Oklahoma, which, again, that state with all your native nations is a very active area. LaFleur and McCurtain. Yeah, I think it's McCurtain County. Having a senior moment here. I was up there with two other mixed blood native people. Been up there with full blood too. That's a whole other long story I can't get into right now with the time, but we were up there. I got some pretty decent video of a side peeker, one up in a tree, but we were around our campfire up there one of the evenings. We were up there 3 or 4 days, and we were getting all kinds of objects coming into the camp area. And none of us were hit. It wasn't malicious. I think they could hit you if they wanted to. They're extremely accurate on throwing and tossing stuff. But broken bark, broken branches, little rocks came rolling in from various directions. And this went on for the better part of an hour. And it was kind of funny. We were trying to figure out which direction this stuff was coming from. And when we kind of determined which direction it was coming from, it would change. It would go 90 degrees out or a total 180 degrees out. It was like a guessing game for us, where they were, who was throwing. Pretty fun. And I haven't ever had that much continuous activity with stuff being thrown, but it was kind of fun. Well, at one point, one of the three guys there was with me, Jim was his first name. He had been getting up out of his folding chair that was by the campfire, and he was collecting all this stuff, putting it, in a little pile there where they had thrown it to us. And I was standing behind him, standing up with my FLIR thermal scope. And like I said, I wasn't trying to trick them, but I was scanning. And if they were peeking out, I was going to video them or take a picture of them, just gathering stuff. And it wasn't being sneaky or trying to hide. And this one piece came rolling in there, and Jim got up out of his folding camp chair, and he started walking to where this thing rolled in. You could see by the light of the fire, where it had come to rest about 15 feet away. As he's getting up, he starts walking over there. He kind of jokingly says, "Can't you guys throw this any closer so I don't have to get up?" Just joking around. It was real kind of a light, relaxing moment. Before he stooped down to pick up that object, I hear the distinct thump in the folding chair in front of me, and I eased down and looked there by the campfire light, and there is a quarter-size rock sitting in the middle of his chair. And they both said, Jim and the other individual there, they said, "What was that?" I said, "It's a rock, and it just landed in Jim's chair." Now, for him to say that in a joking manner, and then these subjects, number one, having the accuracy to put that rock there is amazing. Okay, it didn't bounce out. So your angles and speed would be very critical for that to do that. And you'd have to be extremely accurate. And second, understanding him exactly and engaging in banter or joking back with us shows these subjects have intellect, cognitive thinking, and humor to them. I've talked with other people. They can be pranksters too, and all in good taste. It ties into what I've learned is a mutual respect for them. Anytime I go out, maybe not with the people in the group, because a lot of them would roll their eyes, but I like to get away from the group, and I just like to talk. And I'll say things like, "We're just here visiting. We're not here to hurt you." Things like that. I have on occasion asked them, "Could you just give me a sign that you know who I am and, know that I'm here?" And it would take a long time to get into those stories. But I think probably one of the more humorous, and again, I can't say 100% for certain, but the law of averages, things can happen and you think, man, it's not likely that it could have happened any other way. But I was up in southeastern Oklahoma with my in-laws, and this whole group, it was a family gathering, and my daughter-in-law invited me to go with this side of her family, a family reunion. We weren't blood related or anything, but, by marriage, we were, our daughter-in-law, but it was on her side of the family. And we made these get-togethers for several years, very enjoyable. We were welcome, had a great time. we were out there around the campfire one night, and I want to say there's probably about 30 people out there. And at some point, as often in a mixed group, one of the people, very good taste, it wasn't rude or abusive or antagonistic in any way, but he brought me up and said, well, Rick's here, and how's your Bigfoot research going? Obviously, between, about 30 adults, maybe more, about another dozen children of various ages, you get the whole stare, some of them smiling, some of them thinking, oh, brother, you believe in Bigfoot, that type of stuff. And I'm sure people listening have had that. They relate their experiences. And I said, well, and I started talking with this group, sitting in my chair. I don't exactly remember what I was discussing, but in the middle of this, okay, in me speaking, it sounded like a car had run off the road about 50 yards from us and was coming through the trees, busting and cracking, and it was very prolific and intense. And there was actually a couple of people jumped out of their chairs to start running until it subsided. Of course, people are jumping up. What was that? And you can kind of see by the campfire dust and stuff over there. I quit talking and I'm looking thinking, what in the world? So a couple guys grab flashlights and they start running up the hill there at a camp. And they got up there and they were up there for a while. I could hear them talking. I kind of stayed down by I wasn't afraid, but there's enough people up there looking to see what it was. I just kind of sat there, and they came back, and a oak tree across that access road, and I'm not talking about a small oak tree, but a fairly good sized oak tree. And I went up and looked at it later, had split cleanly down the middle of that 3.5 foot in diameter trunk. I mean, the two main feeder splits, it split right. It was like you took a log splitter and just split that huge oak tree in half. There was no dead rot. There was no wind, snow, or any forces I know, and it was all clean, healthy wood. But that big tree had been split in half. I can't say for certain to this day what it might have been, what caused that oak tree. But I thought it was kind of coincidental, right in the middle of me talking about Bigfoot and mentioning that they were, matter of fact, in this area. I had seen, I think, 3 figures up across the river the night before or evening before. Was it conclusive? No, but where these 3 subjects were standing would have taken a big effort to even get up that steep hill on the other side. And I had mentioned, I said, they're right here. They're here. And that's about the time that tree decided to split. Coincidence? Maybe. But I know there were several people giving me odd stares after that. I kind of quit talking and everything. But that was just kind of a coincidental incident there. I have got tons of stuff. I'm trying to think of one of them that, okay, here's one. I was told early in my experiences that if you go visit them, they will come visit you, and as many other people, I say, yeah, right. I live in a subdivision in a fairly, there is open fields around there and probably a 10-acre cedar field at that time. They've since developed some of it next to our house, and we were at the edge or end of a cul-de-sac. Wouldn't be impossible to get to our property without exposing, a lot at night. You could make it. It'd have to be real convoluted to come from the area. Matter of fact, the area of my first sighting is 12 miles away from where my house was there. We have since sold that property, but I've been told if you go visit them, they'll come visit you. And it was in December. I had planted a row of trees on the east side of our property line, which in that subdivision, our property was the biggest there, taking up almost a half an acre in the cul-de-sac, and a big area there, fenced in, about half of it. I had planted a row of cedar trees, had them transplanted. I was tired of people in the field and the wooded area next door thinking my front yard was an extension of that field, and I didn't like four-wheeler tracks and everything across my lawn. So I was planting trees there to kind of put a barrier. And I was out there watering it. And there had been times at night that I had felt like we were being watched, maybe. I won't go into it again, but there were a lot of weird things happening around the property, around our fence, large stuff being moved, something trying to dig under the fence. I'll leave it at that. But my wife, who is neutral, and to this day, she'll tell you I'm not a liar. She knows that. She's seen their eye shine. She heard a growl one time. But until she physically sees one, which she hasn't, she's not really interested in my field research, doesn't mind me going out and doing it. It's just not her thing. Crafting and other stuff is her interest. And we're at the age where we're good together and we're good apart. She can kind of do her thing. She's not a clinger, pretty independent. It's been that way for over 40 years. Now there I'm dating myself a little bit. But anyway, weird stuff started happening around the house. So I put up a 24/7, 8-camera security system outside around the perimeter of the house. Nothing could get up to the house. There were a couple little blind spots, but they'd have to cross a camera to get to those blind spots. Just weird stuff. I'll leave it at that. And I put a Motory game cam over my front porch to supplement the 24/7. I think it was at that time, before I upgraded, I think it had a 1-week loop in it. So if you caught something within that week and wanted to look at it, you could view it and save it. At that time, I think it was on a 1-week loop. I eventually upgraded the hard drive to a 2-week, bigger size, where it would take 2 weeks of continuous 24/7 before it would overwrite. So you had about 2 weeks to get in there and check it. So anyway, I'm out there watering this new row of trees. I think it was December 13th, almost the winter solstice. So it'd be a real short day. At a little after 5, it was dark. And this was about 10 minutes before 6 when I finished. But I'd been out there watering. And like I said, there had been times I had felt like maybe being watched, but wasn't conclusive. Just, go on in the house and forget about it. I had finished and I was walking back towards the faucet, which was on the west side of the house. And right about the time I got to the walkway leading up, concrete walkway leading up from the sidewalk up to the porch of the house where the Motory game camera was setting, my walking tripped the camera. But at this point, when I got to that walkway in front of that camera, and like I said, it wasn't pitch black, but very dim. My porch light didn't illuminate. The street light was down the street. Neighbors' porch lights. It was fairly dark. All I know is something dark on my right side came by about the speed. I didn't hear any footsteps, like a moderate throw to first base. So 30, 40 miles an hour maybe. But it was fast. And I could hear the wind and the whoosh when it went by me. It was dark and I wasn't looking there, but my peripheral caught this dark shape just fly by my right side. And I ducked. I kind of dodged and ducked and turned to my right and then looked out in front of me and I couldn't see anything. I thought it was a nighthawk, an owl, or some kind of bird, crow maybe diving past me, because I heard the wind as it swished by, but I didn't see anything and didn't think much more of it other than, a bird or maybe a bat. It hadn't been a big bat, but something flew by me at a pretty good speed, clip. Couldn't see it in the dim light. I went ahead and turned off the faucet, went on in the house, and didn't think any more about it at all. Didn't give it a second thought, just thought it was, a little bit odd, but never had a bird fly by me like that at night. But I've had bats. I remember that a couple times, but they weren't near this big. So I went on in the house, and about 2 weeks later, I pulled the memory card out of the game cam. Nothing that I knew of, had happened, but I just wanted to check. And I was going through the pictures. The way this was set up is it would snap a picture with IR flash, and then it would have a 20-second video with audio. Well, us going by real quick, there wasn't anything on the video. Didn't hear anything other than me walking over to turn off the faucet. But that picture caught this, what appears to be a 6-foot subject with long flowing hair, blasting past me. You can see their legs. They're not flying. This is a bipedal, long-haired subject actually running by me. I never heard the footsteps. Again, it's incredible stuff, but I've seen these subjects move in my thermal, and I've got video of that, and I won't get into it. I've just seen them do some extraordinary things physically that doesn't really make a lot of sense. I believe they are very gifted in abilities. You mention paranormal to some researchers, and they won't go there. They'll rebuke you. They'll chastise you. They won't believe a word, but I have seen and looked at other videos, and I have videos of them. It almost looks like a fast forward, speed or something. It's just like a flash. Call it paranormal if you want, and I won't go very far there because that's a whole other hour. But I've had a lot of encounters. I don't try to prove a point. If people are interested, I'll talk about it. If they don't want to hear it, I won't talk about it. But again, I've got a book published on Amazon. You can Google Richard Taylor Bigfoot. It'll bring you to the links. It has some of my early experiences with these subjects. I believe they're tribal. I believe they are a group of people, not as we know it. I have my own personal opinions there as to exactly what they are, and that's up to debate. But they're like us in very many ways. They're not like us in many other ways. And I have a lot of documented things there that people would list as paranormal, and that's fine, if you want to believe it or not. But I've had witnesses with me. One short story, and this goes back to about 2010, when I was still looking for answers. I was up at the Honobee Bigfoot Conference. I was helping out there as a volunteer just to get information, just to soak in. Back then I was really hungry. It was before I had my close visual encounters. I just thought, yeah, they could exist. And I was there out front helping one person by the name of Tim with security there on the conference location. And we had a speaker that had complained about kids. She said kids knocking on her cabin, the cabin that speaker was housed in. And she had come over and got us up, and we got up and went outside, and we got in Tim's pickup. And I hunkered down low. We figured kids were running around the camp messing with people. And so we were going to catch them. So we're in Tim's truck. All the lights are out. We're hunkered down, where our heads are below the headrest, so anybody couldn't see us in the dim light very easily. And I want to say it was a better part of an hour, him and I sitting there talking or whispering. We could hear the distinct crunch, crunch, crunch of somebody. Our cabin was next to the speaker's cabin, and we were facing our cabin in the truck. And we could hear footsteps coming around the back of our cabin. There was dry leaves, all around. And so him and I eased out without, dome light coming on. We eased out of the truck. We walked up to our cabin, and then we went to the right on that corner, and we could still hear the slow crunch, crunch, crunch. We were going to catch these people. So him and I ease out. Now, between the cabins, there was no lights on, none on the cabin or anything. But the highway down the hill there had a street light. So there was enough backlight from where we were looking on the corner of the cabin. We could see trees and limbs and stuff, and you could probably make out anybody walking between the two buildings. Well, I'm following the sound of those footsteps, and I am not seeing anybody coming through the trees. Now, I'm telling you what I saw back then is I didn't see anything, but I could hear and actually even see some of the leaves being disturbed. Well, I heard Tim bolt over to our cabin. I thought, good, he's getting a camera. And I'm still watching this, and it's diagonally heading back towards that other cabin. It's not coming towards me or our cabin, but it's diagonally. But I can make the progress just by the foot crunching and stirring of the leaves. I can make its progress, but I'm not seeing anything. And I thought Tim was maybe going to get a light or a camera until I heard the cabin door close and lock. He locked the cabin door. It freaked him out that much. So I'll just end it with that story that there are things that occur out there that I have no earthly explanation for. I'm not looking for the paranormal. I'm not trying to stretch this into that, but I have experienced things of them, by them, and maybe because of them. And I don't have any answers for, but it is fun out there watching them if they're there. I've had a great time with it. I'll probably continue this until I'm too old not to get out there, but I've met a lot of wonderful people, and I love sharing a lot of wonderful stories. And I really appreciate Vic giving me this opportunity to share. I hope y'all have a wonderful Christmas and a happy New Year. Thank you very much for this time or privilege of sharing. God bless y'all. Be safe.
Well, that's it for tonight's show. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and let us know. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.